never made a drink my entire life.
I made a drink recently.
What alcoholic drink?
Yes, but it could also be non-alcoholic if you prefer.
Okay, you can have it virgin. All right. Well, what? Don't tell me if it was successful or not. Give me the process.
So I came up with the idea because at the school the kids have a project in the computer class where they got to make a website for a restaurant that they can make up.
Okay.
And so I was thinking about I don't know why I came up with the idea of a Street Fighter themed restaurant.
Okay.
And one of the drink ideas for a drink I had was called the Red Cyclone.
Okay.
So the idea I came up with, it's ice,
all right,
strawberries, raspberries,
all right,
lemonade, and then to make it Russian, just put vodka.
Okay.
And you blend it.
How do you blend it? Do you just use a cocktail shaker? What do you use?
I
don't know if you have a cocktail.
I use the blender.
Okay, you use the blender.
Yeah, and then you blend it with a blender.
All right. Did you pull a Tom Cruise cocktail thing? Did you take the whole blender and
No, because you can't
slip it over your back?
No, that's dumb. You do that with the cocktail shaker.
Okay. So so it was just you and your girl.
Yeah.
You both tested it. How'd it go?
Pretty good.
Pretty good?
Yeah. Problem is, she's like, don't put that much vodka in. I'm like, I want to put vodka in it.
Or else it's not Russian.
Or else it's not Russian. So I start putting some in. And she's like, that's too much.
You just
I put a splash in. She's like, it's too much.
You just
but she dumped a whole thing of lemonade into it.
Oh, that ruins it.
Well, not really. It's like one of the small bottles, like a Snapple size bottle.
All right.
So I didn't want to do too much lemonade.
Well, you could substitute it if you don't want vodka and you want it to taste the same. You just replace it with lighter fluid. It will taste the same thing.
True.
Vodka tastes like lighter fluid. You ever watch that movie?
No.
Man with Two Brains with Bruce Campbell?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's my favorite line.
Oh, was that the man? No, I'm thinking of Man with the
Screaming. Oh, Man with the Screaming Brain.
Yeah,
that's what it is. The Russian guy goes, vodka. He's like, I don't like vodka. Why? Vodka tastes like lighter fluid. I really like. Hey guys, Fear the Ink podcast.
Fear the Drink.
Fear the Drink. Guys, that's coming. That's gonna happen.
It's an all drink podcast.
No, Rob. All the stories are going to be nautical themed. They're all going to be like ghost pirates.
Oh, that'd be
Fear the Drink.
Is it going to be like ghost stories in a bar?
Like in a grog bar?
Sure. Just don't drink this.
I thought no. It's going to be we're going to review IPAs, some homebrew beer. We're not sponsored, but there is a podcast that does that.
They just talk about homebrew beers.
Yeah,
I know a teacher that does that.
Has a podcast where he reviews beer?
No, he makes it.
He makes his own?
Yeah.
I think you're on that road, Rob. I think for some reason working in the school system makes you go.
I know, guy.
Beers are a thing. Got to drown out the screaming of children.
Yeah,
somehow.
Yeah, he said him and his friend do a cool thing every year for St. Patrick's Day where they just get together and they come up with a theme and then they make a beer out of it.
Oh, that's nice.
And his was, he wanted to do a Shamrock Shake.
Is it the leprechaun?
What?
Is it the leprechaun?
No.
Oh, you'd serve it in a shoe. Drink it from a shoe. I had better ideas than this guy.
Well, no, his friend wanted to do a chocolate beer recipe.
Oh, okay.
But he wanted to do a Shamrock Shake recipe.
All right.
But, so, yeah. They said I was making a chocolate beer, but then he said I was going to put mint extract on the side, so if you want to, just add it in if you want to make it a Shamrock Shake.
I like that. Don't they have flavored Shamrock Shakes now?
I don't know.
I feel like a couple years ago, they're like, hey, there's chocolate Shamrock Shakes. I've never had a Shamrock Shake.
Neither have I.
Hey, listeners, I was going to tell them to send us Shamrock Shakes. We're just going to open a box and it's just green fluid.
In a melted box.
And we're just like, is this the guy that got run over in RoboCop when he got hit by the ass? Help me.
No, I never had one, even though, every time recently, this year, when the Shamrock Shakes came back, girlfriend and I are like, hey, let's go get Shamrock Shakes. I'm like, okay, sure, I never had one. We get there, and yeah, no, we stopped them already. And it's like, fuck.
They stopped. They seized our Shamrock Shakes.
We'll get to a scary story at some point.
Yeah, we'll get to the scary story. I mean, you guys like it when we talk, I guess, I hope. We're still trying to figure out how to get on iTunes.
Still? Even though I sent you the thing?
Yeah, no, because this thing is it can't even run current iTunes.
Okay.
You have a better chance.
I have a better chance?
You're gonna have to do it.
I'm going to have to do it.
Someone's going to have to put up a responsibility here.
Okay. I guess I got to be the responsible one.
Well, all you got to do, I'll set up... we'll talk about this off the air. Fear the Ink, episode 8. I said the goddamn episode number. Dang it, I promised myself I wouldn't do that. But, Tunnels by Michael Whitehouse. Mm-hmm. I hope I said that right.
I believe you did.
It is. Michael Whitehouse. He lives in Washington, D.C. Probably. It is rated 9.0 at the esteemed creepypasta.com. Go on, sir.
Go on.
All right. All you. You kick it off.
I once knew a man who was afraid of nothing.
Clutch Nixon.
True, man.
It's the story of Clutch Nixon.
I once knew a man when I was very young. His name was Super Joe.
Oh yeah.
No monstrosity man-made nor fictitious.
Yes.
Could subdue his spirits, and the mere mention of the word supernatural would elicit a most cynical example of laughter. This bravery was both his greatest strength and his most profound weakness.
Ooh.
For ignorance and heedlessness can often be mistaken for a deep and foolhardy sense of courage. He was to learn the limits of his bravery down in those oppressive tunnels, deep below the streets of Amsterdam.
Oh, shit. Get that next chunk. Also, it's pronounced Henke.
Henke?
Yeah.
Wait, where? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Henke. His name was Henke. Due mainly to the Finnish ancestry.
He's from Atlantis!
It's about an Atlantean who just visited Amsterdam. He's like, dude, I gotta visit Amsterdam. They do shit everywhere.
They don't got mushrooms in Atlantis.
How do you think I'm supposed to smoke this blunt?
Yeah, underwater. It's almost 420.
Right?
There's no 420 in Atlantis.
Like, the best thing I got is space cake, but it gets too moist.
What do you lick? They probably lick, like...
No, you can't lick anything because it just dissolves.
Lick like a lionfish or something and get high.
Yeah, but then you die.
They're Atlanteans, man. They're stronger than regular people. I just get them high.
Yeah, true. Finnish ancestry on his father's side, and although his parents had passed away at an early age, it was clear that he believed his courageous convictions could be attributed to his father's character.
Okay. Backstory, I like it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of interested in where this goes because I can imagine the deep underground of Amsterdam is probably fucked up.
I like how this is like we're speaking of someone's legend.
Yeah.
It's really cool. All right. I had met Henke 4 years earlier while traveling with some friends on a rather common rite of passage. Backpacking through Europe during a university break. He and a few of his friends were on a similar trip and happened to be staying at the same youth hostel as myself and my companions in Rome. We all got on well, but both Henke and I struck up an immediate rapport with one another, as he was a keen musician and I was, at the time, filled with the self-promise, or should I say delusion, of stardom through my own musical pursuits.
This friendship continued onward, and we maintained it via email, swapping musical discoveries, talking about politics, and generally getting to know one another as best as two people can through simple correspondence. I grew to enjoy our friendly debates over the years, and on a few occasions, we even visited one another. Henke moved around a lot, and as such, it gave me a good excuse to visit a number of mainland European countries. Not to mention that he always knew which local pubs served the best beer, and which restaurants were the best to avoid.
Last year, I visited Henke in Amsterdam. The Dutch city seemed to be a good fit for him, as he always liked to live in the liveliest of places, and with countless meandering canals, bridges, and walkways swamped with millions of tourists every year, Amsterdam, for Henke, I almost said honky,
Honk.
felt like the very embodiment of life and vibrancy. At the time, he had been recently hired to carry out some important maintenance work under, oh boy, Rijksmuseum, which is one of Amsterdam's most impressive buildings, and this seemed to have rooted him to the one place for longer than usual. Oh, he's gone stir crazy, isn't he?
Am I continuing or are you?
Yeah, no, you got these two chunks.
Okay. When I met him in a small, darkened corner of a local pub, well away from the burgeoning tourist trade, I was shocked at his appearance. Here was a friend I had grown to know as being larger than life, exuding bravado, and yet I was presented with a shell of a man, slight in stature and racked with self-doubt. He proceeded to impart on me the circumstances which resulted in his precarious condition, of which I will relate to you now.
Okay. Henke had been working as a civil engineer for some time and relished the challenge of renovating and maintaining the Rijksmuseum. I don't know how to pronounce that, so I'm just
going to say...
Rijksmuseum?
No, not Rijks. Rijksmuseum?
Rijksmuseum? A building with such a long and compelling history. The museum houses Amsterdam's finest collection of historical relics, and being given access to some of its most hidden places, which are inaccessible to the general public, piqued Hanke's fascination with the obscure and unique.
He has been hired most specifically to lead maintenance crew, which had been assigned to assess and repair the building's foundations. The oldest part of the structure dated back centuries to the most bizarre, and it must be said, quite horrific history. The Rijksmuseum itself had been constructed in 1885, but what it had been built upon possessed a much older and interesting history.
In the bowels of the building, under its marble floors and deep red brickwork, lay a labyrinth of abandoned tunnels, which at one time served as part of the old city's sewer network. They'd been long since disused and fallen into disrepair, but they were nonetheless an essential part of the building's foundations and had to be assessed and repaired. Otherwise, the entire structure would be in danger of subsiding.
I'm liking this so far.
Yeah, I'm liking this so far. It's a slow burn.
Yeah, this is kind of reminding me of a video someone I saw like a long time ago of don't go in the sewers of Britain or something like that because there's apparently stuff living in there.
Yeah.
And it's just like footage of of a camera like looking down a dark tunnel and you just see these pair of eyes just kind of pop out for a minute and then go back.
Yeah.
But then they kind of lean out to see.
Yeah, who's there?
Yeah, who's there?
It's nuts.
And it's creepy.
It is super creepy.
I don't like it. The ground and upper levels of the museum were beautifully and displayed mainly wonderful historical relics all over the world. So welcoming and warm was the atmosphere of the building that it was difficult to imagine the darkness which festered below. After some quick words with the building manager, Henke proceeded to an old, seldom used room at the back of the museum, which housed a rather antiquated, creaking and cage-like elevator, which was being used to assess the lower levels of the sewers underneath.
Pulling on a pair of dirt-covered yellow overalls, complete with a hard hat and headlamp, Henke entered the elevator for his first descent. On his trip downwards towards the abandoned sewers, Henke...
What? Henke?
That sounded like you were putting on leather gloves. He was capping his drink, and it sounded like he was putting on leather gloves to strangle someone. Henke thought to himself that those of a nervous disposition may let such a dank and Alright, that was fucking stupid. An isolated place prey on their minds. This may have explained why the previous man in charge of the repairs had left so abruptly, citing nervous exhaustion and refusing to ever so much as set foot in those pitch-black corridors of Cold Stone ever again. Oh, it's a Cold Stone creamery. Oh no. It's full of ice cream and death.
All these flavors.
Oh. this misery.
You choose death.
All these ghosts, and you still won't be my boo.
all this death, and you still choose salt. The elevator winch and engine stuttered as it lowered Hank down 4 levels into the basement. With each passing floor, he observed a slight dimming of the lights, and each subterranean level appeared more sparse and stone-like than the one before. A rusted plate attached to the elevator betrayed its age. It struck Hank that the year of its construction, 1932, must have been amongst the last period of maintenance carried out through before the persecutions of the Jewish people and the outbreak of war in Europe.
History. We're getting a lot of history here, and it's only adding to the creepy factor. The point that it was like present during like so many atrocities is like making it terrifying.
Yeah, because underground horrors mixed with war and history is not a good place to be.
That's right. Henke knew much of the shameful history of the region as he was part Jewish, and his great-grandfather had died during the Holocaust. Many had fled to Amsterdam for sanctuary from the Nazi regime in the early 1930s, but the long blighting arm of Hitler's horrific final solution eventually reached the borders of Holland, sweeping many thousands away to those shameful and barbaric concentration camps. Alright.
The elevator shuddered to a halt, and after forcing the rusted sliding door aside, Henke disembarked. The tunnels, comprising Amsterdam's disguised sewer network, were curious in construction and steeped in a history which stretched back much farther into the distant past than that of the museum itself. Having spoken to his employers, Henke had been specifically told to pay heed to the assessment and repair crew's knowledge of the tunnel's layout, as the place could be disorienting, and as the lighting system required to illuminate repair work had not been fully installed yet, that he would find it all too easy to get lost.
Okay. Now, what's cool is from looking ahead a bit, we're done with the historical background, which is cool because now
Now we get to the story.
Yes, we are now steeped in the atmosphere of just, we know shit's fucked.
This is a fucked up place.
And we're
going to be in darkness, and it's going to be tight. So, which is all the thing it's saying for disorientation.
It's a spook tunnel.
It's literally setting up what's going to try and let you feel.
Exactly. Alright. Most importantly, Henke was informed that the two-way radios normally used to communicate between team members had been playing up, and that they were very unreliable due to interference, probably produced by nearby metallic deposits in the ground. This meant that communication between his team members would have to be carried out verbally or by using the light from their torches to convey simple messages via Morse code. This was particularly useful in the longer tunnels. In any case, it struck Henke that the catacombs below were really isolated, lonely places. Care must be taken.
Henke was greeted by Jones, his second in command. Jones was a substantially stout fellow and was rather humorous in nature. He debriefed Hank on the current progress being made by his new team, informing him that the initial mapping and assessment of the tunnels had gone well. All the way there were 16 four-man crews, each of which would be assigned a section of the sewers to repair. Henke would supervise 2 of the crews which were working in one of the more isolated tunnels.
After walking... Oh, wait, no, you know what? Take this chunk, and I'll take the next long one.
So that's perfect. After walking for 15 minutes, Henke arrived at the area which would be his workplace for the next few months. The sound of occasional drilling could be heard in the distance as the workers continued to install the still non-operational lighting system. As Henke's men would be working further away from the other crews, it seemed logical, although not desirable, that they would have a lighting system installed last.
Okay. It's ramping up. Can you feel it?
Yeah, I can feel it.
All right. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah,
I really like
the
the story. Oh, God. All right. Each passageway seemed oddly shaped, with no two tunnels being quite alike. This entire section of the sewer was in fact so antiquated that it had been built long before the careful planning of such constructions had become commonplace. One tunnel would arch onwards for over several hundred meters in a strange semicircle, while others bisected it at right angles, carrying on in a regimented straight line into the darkness. Henke even found a passageway which seemed to dip and rise only to slither its way along in an unnatural S shape. Those tunnels seemed to go on forever. Others stopped abruptly as if the original builders had been unable to complete their work, leaving in a hurry. Jones tried to keep the conversation light, and with his experience of walking through the tunnels for the past 2 months, Henke was glad to have a guide to show him the way.
Waiting in a large alcove where 4 of Henke's team, they would work this section of the tunnel during the day, and while the other shift would take over later. Working through the night, Jones introduced each of them. They seemed nice enough, but Henke was surprised to find the men largely in gripes of silence. In his experience, humor was normally found in abundance, with repair crews using it to slice through the monotony of working in such cramped and repetitive conditions. Here, though, he found them uttering not one word, sitting in silence in that imposing alcove, removed from any consideration of camaraderie or fellowship. The other inference that they were not a collection of subterranean statues was the occasional movement of their headlamps altering the shadows around them. They seemed wholly disconnected from not just each other, but the very environment in which they worked.
Alright. I'm going to take this whole 2 chunks here. Okay. Henke brushed the feeling of unease aside and committed himself to cultivating conversation. If these men were in some way angry or uncomfortable with one another, then Henke would soon lay that to rest. A happy workforce is a productive one. The first order of business was to survey this section of tunnels and decide where repairs were most pressing. Preliminary assessments had already been made, but Henke liked to evaluate any repair project he was involved in from the ground up. Henke walked the catacombs with his team and noticed immediately that they were still on edge, that they seemed frightened in an almost childlike way. No amount of questions, casual or otherwise, could elicit anything other than the one-word broken replies. As they toured the numerous tunnels, lighting their way with the small torches attached to their safety helmets, and taking notes about failing walls, water damage, and estimations of any possible repair time, Henke pressed the men on their obvious sense of fear, asking why such an experienced crew, who no doubt had worked in many tunnels before, were so apprehensive of mere bricks and mortar.
I'll take these next 2 chunks, because that was a pretty big one.
Yeah, this is really good.
Yeah.
It's really well written. We can't even... We're the point of this show is we're not trying to make fun of it.
Yeah.
We're just reading it, and we're just... Whatever comes and whatever happens. And this, we got nothing, because we are in rapture.
Yeah.
Alright? Got it?
Yeah.
Good. Memes just don't happen, alright? Memes have to come.
Yeah, because sometimes it's a good story.
Sometimes it's a good story. Okay? Alright.
They avoided the question, looking nervously at one another and changing the topic of conversation with monotone length.
Lethargy.
Lethargy.
You know what that is?
What?
Lethargy is like when you're like really tired, and you know when you're like off, when you're feeling off, and you're just like kind of sleepwalking through the day.
Yeah.
That's lethargy.
Okay. Lethargy. Monotone lethargy wherever it veered towards their experience of the old sewers, or of their previous boss' unceremonious departure from the job. It began to dawn on Henke that the men's verbal and physical awareness was not the result of tension between workers, but rather of deep-seated and worried apprehension of what he did not know. What was clear that his team seemed to be counting down the minutes until their shift ended, when they could finally clamber out of the darkness and into the safety of the world above.
Oh, I like that.
That's
really cool.
Setting up that, hey, people don't want to be down here.
Yeah, nobody wants to be here. You're new. You don't get it yet, but you will.
You don't want to be here.
Yeah, you don't want. You're going to end up not wanting to be here either.
As the beam from his headlamp trickled over the damp and crumbling brickwork of the tunnel, Henke again conceded to himself that some may find such a setting unnerving, but not him. Whatever had caused such trepidation and disquiet amongst the men working down here was surely a simple case of idle superstition, mischief-making, and the quite understandable physiology toll of working in the dark, cramped, and forgotten parts of the world. Even Jones, who had through most of the catacombs been jovial and talkative, now adopted the same sullen expression and seriousness of disposition as the others.
I really like that word, jovial.
Yeah.
Because it's, you know how, like, in languages that use symbols, like one symbol will mean, like, a million things?
Yeah.
Jovial is one of those words in English.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I get it. All you need to do is use that word. Alright, I'm going to do these 3. I guess technically that's 3.
Yeah, because it's just one line and then...
So it's like
another.
medium, tiny, medium. Alright. The passages wound and meandered their way through the ground. Long, steady trajectories intermittently and abruptly interrupted by sharp blind corners, which made it difficult for Hanke to identify exactly where they were. There were so many winding corridors that Hanke felt slightly disoriented and was ready to joke with his men that if they didn't like him as a boss, they could probably leave him here, and he would never find his way out. But his men were no longer with him. He was standing at the mouth of a tunnel, and while he was continued onwards talking, trying to fill in difficult silences, his men had stopped at the last junction. They stood motionless some 20 feet behind, staring at Hanke with blank expressions, occasionally betrayed by the slightest flicker of a very real and gripping emotion beneath. A look of suppressed terror.
Damn.
Ooh.
That's pretty fucking good.
Nice.
When he asked why the men were not following, they whispered in reply that where they stood was where the last of the repair work was needed. Pulling out a map and pursuing it intently by the light of the headlamp, Henke surmised that he must have wandered into the most remote part of the sewer network, at the back of the catacombs, and while the tunnels continued into the foreboding distance, this must have marked the boundary of the I forgot how to say it now.
Rijksmuseum? Yeah.
Foundation. What confused him was that where he stood had been marked for repair. He was standing at the entrance of what appeared to be a rather innocuous tunnel, but on the wall next to the opening, Henke could clearly see that someone had placed an identification plaque there, marking it for repair. It read, Tunnel 72F, water damage, and failing brickwork.
After double-checking his map, it was clear to Henke that Tunnel 72F was indeed in under the Rijksmuseum foundations and had to be appraised and repaired. But when he told his men that they simply informed him that where they stood was as far as they would go, anger began to take over, accompanied by frustration that the team he was supposed to be supervising were being so difficult. But even raising his voice and demanding that they head into the tunnel did not seem to move them. Just as things became heated and Henke began demanding that the men do as he say, Jones interjected. I'm going to do Jones's here.
Okay.
We've worked down here for 2 months, Henke. This is a good, hard-working, talented crew you have. They will do exactly as you ask, when you ask it. But you'll have to accept that for them, and me, our work stops at this junction, and that none of us will go near Tunnel 72F. Whether you want to believe it or not, there's something in there. Ooh.
Taking a deep breath and calming himself, Henke explained to his men that he understood the stress the stress induced by working in such an environment for an extended period of time. But that repairs in that tunnel had to be carried out. He would talk to them later about it, but for now, he would carry out the survey himself. You fucking dumbass, and this is how you die.
He's fearless. He's Clutch Nixon. He's Henke.
And this is
Henke
how
Nixon.
and this is how Henke dies.
He doesn't die though.
Soon. We don't know that.
Oh yeah, he could be talking to a ghost.
Yeah. Maybe whatever killed him took his body.
Maybe he turned into the cab driver from Halloween Town.
Maybe.
Where are you guys going?
As Henke stepped over the threshold and into the apparently forbidden tunnel, Jones and the other men protested
Vehemently.
Vehemently?
Vehemently? There's like a million ways to say that word.
Vehemently, shouting at Henke to leave the passageway immediately, but he saw this as foolish.
Foolish.
You fool!
You fool.
He was not to be swayed by unsubstantiated, superstitious nonsense. There was nothing in this tunnel to fear. But once more, Henke would prove to others that they should not be scared. By stepping up, being a man, and pushing forward into places otherwise who are more timid in nature fear to tread, it was a point of pride for Henke. He believed always being bold.
Ooh-wee.
So much boldness in this flavor.
You're gonna die, boy.
This is how you die.
Okay. While the tunnel seemed fairly common in its construction at first glance, as Henke progressed deeper into the darkness, it was apparent that this was unlike any sewer he had seen before. The ground was uneven, the floor dipped and rose, much like some of the other tunnels, but what was peculiar was how fractured the surface felt under his feet. The ground was obscured by a thick, almost oily water, which in places reached up as high as his knees. He trudged through the stagnant water slowly, not because he was scared, but simply to ensure he had a sound footing. One thing was apparent. However long the water had lay there, it was long enough to fester and produce an unpleasant, rotten stench.
Ew.
The walls were of a different, much older composition than most of the brickwork he had seen in the sewers elsewhere. Whatever the material was which had been used, it was hundreds of years old and was obviously failing, with long penetrating cracks scarring the surface of the increasingly unstable walls and ceiling.
The light from Henke's headlamp was enough to illuminate such of the tunnel, but as he ventured further towards what he thought was a dead end, he realized that the passage was narrowing and that the tunnel itself did not stop there, but rather taper slightly before curving abruptly into a blind corner.
I don't like that. It's like a right angle, right? Just
yeah, you're just walking, and all of a sudden,
it just goes nope.
Yeah. Henke estimated that he was around 80 feet into the sewers, and while his curiosity for what could be beyond that corner urged him to move forward, he believed he had made his point to his men, and would now ask them to abandon their fears and enter the tunnel with him. He unholstered the back-hand-held radio, which all the workers had been issued with from his side, and began requesting for Jones and the others to meet him at the corner of the tunnel.
Take that next one.
No response, and nothing but a quiet buzz could be heard from the radio speaker.
Ooh.
Of course, Henke now remembered that he had been warned about how unreliable the radios could be, but just as he was about to turn and shout on his men, something caught his eye. Surely not.
There was nothing in this old tunnel but stagnant water and himself. But pushing relentlessly against Henke's bravado and self-assured disposition was the creeping reality that something was standing at the end of the tunnel. Obscured by the turn, Henke could only see a glimpse of it, but it was unmistakable. Whoa! Oh no! Something happened!
Oh no!
Oh no! Wait! Oh, okay, I got it. The web page died. The esteemed creepypasta.com. Obscured by the turn, Henke could see only a glimpse of it, but it was unmistakable. A ragged piece of cloth poked out from around the corner, and although Henke's mind was unwilling to accept it, the cloth was obviously part of a sleeve which contained an arm, of whose or what's he did not know. Disbelief. Stubbornness can be an effective tonic for even the most horrifying and unbelievable of situations. Henke's belief in himself and his long history of triumphs over adversity welled up inside of him, filling his chest with pride, and with a strong, confident stride, Henke marched toward whatever was behind that corner.
The slush and slosh of the black water echoed throughout the tunnel, and that is a gross image in my head now.
The slush and slosh?
Oh, just sewer water?
Yeah, I don't like the slosh. Alright, that's a sound, right?
But the slush?
Slush. Like, the consistency of, like, slushy snow.
Yeah.
But it's underwater and you can't see it.
And it's sewer water?
And you're like, what? That's gray water. That's gray water. That's gray water.
Ugh.
You can get HIV from that.
Yeah. Echoed throughout the tunnels as he made his way back, and he's made his way to that blind turn. Apprehension now turned to sadness and empathy, for standing there, shivering and disheveled, was a girl who could not have seen more than 13 years. Her face and hands were blackened with grime and dirt, hiding her pale and malnourished frame. A ripped shirt was all that she wore, hanging from her loosely, with much of her body exposed to the cold of the dank, isolated place.
Run! Run! You're gonna die! Dummy! Trust no one. Help no one.
Especially in the sewers.
Especially in the sewers of Amsterdam.
When you just see someone in the sewers and you know this is like a really bad place, just don't help.
Just don't help them.
Just worry about you.
Turn around.
Help you.
Turn around. Help you. Help you. You are number one.
Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, go
Okay.
Take this next chunk.
Gazing at him between strands of dark matted hair, Hank was struck by how beautiful the young girl was, and how afraid she must have been. At first, he believed that somehow she must have made her way into the sewers and lost her way, but no matter how softly he asked her, she would not answer, appearing afraid and nervous.
Gazing at it. Oh, wait. No. Okay, here it is. Oops. Hank had tried his radio again, but was greeted with the same meaningless static. Regardless, he had to get her out of that tunnel, back through the sewers and into the Rijksmuseum and seen by a doctor. He did not want to shout on his men, as it may have added to the girl's disquiet, so he decided to lead her out of the passage himself. As he approached, Henke spoke gently to the girl, explaining that he would take her up above to safety. She seemed terrified of him, and this made Henke feel uncomfortable, as he prided himself on being someone who would do anything to protect the vulnerable, and not at all someone to be feared.
Man, Hank is a good guy.
Henk is a good guy, but he's a dummy!
She made no sound, but as Henke neared, she raised her hand, pointing one finger at the light on his helmet. He suddenly realized that the light must have been frightening her somehow. I'm not turning it off, lady.
No, don't turn it off. Jesus.
So he immediately took the lamp off and held it in his hand, the torch now illuminating the girl's shirt more starkly. The changed angle of light brought something unsettling to Henke's attention. Pinned to her shirt was a yellow cloth star. It surprised him as it was entirely familiar, but it took a moment for his mind to grasp the memory. It was exactly the yellow star forced upon the Jewish population during the persecution to allow non-Jewish and members of the Nazi regime to identify them.
Oh, snap!
I was kind of hoping it led to this.
Yeah.
Jewish mole men. I don't mean this like.
No, I know, it's just
because
no, man.
Like, I imagine like what happened was a bunch of Nazis like threw them into the sewers and locked them up, and then they became mole men over time.
You know what? I like that. Lobster Johnson
Fighting Jewish men.
fighting Jewish mole men.
Like that's kind of how I was hoping this was going to allude to.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping this continues in that direction.
I'm just imagining the Marvel villain Mole Man.
But now he's Jewish.
And his moloids, which I always thought sounded wrong, and like calling them moloids always like bothered me.
Yeah, that sounds fucked up.
That sounds like something that sounds derogatory. Henke's mind fought against the ramifications of such a discovery. After a momentary pause, he once again was resolute, disregarding the cloth star and asserting himself that he must take this poor girl out of such horrible surroundings. A tremendous sense of sadness overcame Henke as he grew closer. The torch flickered unusually in his hand as he looked down at the girl, her face momentarily illuminated by the shifting light, as he prepared to carry her out of the sewers if need be. But this sense of duty, this compulsion to be brave and assertive in even the darkest of places, was now replaced with something which Henke had never felt before. Up his spine and from the very pit of his stomach, fear gripped him. Terror took him. And a horror so potent made him feel anxious, weak, and unsteady. Alright, these three are yours.
Yeah, and I kind of like how this is going. Because it's just like, this is a person who has not feared anything in his life. Now he's feeling it for the first time.
It's coming from the inside out.
It's coming, yeah.
Inside
and I kind of like the idea of, like, this person, because we've all felt fear when we were kids.
Of course.
We were all scared of something. And
yes.
that's natural, because it's your body saying, hey, you're scared, how are you going to react to this?
Exactly.
He's never felt this. This is a person who claims he's never felt this before,
and
now he does not know how to deal with it.
Exactly.
I just love that. For Henke had not noticed something so subtle, yet essential to his predicament. The girl had not stopped pointing at him as he drew closer. Her arm was rigid, and her fingers remained outstretched. Even the light, which was now in his hand, seemed entirely unimportant to her. Realization swept over him like a plague of ejected dread. The girl was not pointing at the light. She was pointing behind him.
Turn around and start swinging. That's what I would do.
Turn around and run!
Punch a dang... I was
run,
really
bro!
That was really lewd. Turn around and just punch a Nazi skeleton.
Run!
Run!
Run, bitch! Henke did not remember much more of what happened in the tunnel.
Oh.
But he knew that he had indeed turned to face whatever was standing there. That he thanked God, not something he was normally inclined to do. That Jones and the other men who feared the dark hollow so acutely had dispensed with his fear and ran into the passageway as soon as they heard his screams.
Henke regained his composure back at the alcove where he had met the men, but he immediately pleaded with them that they take him back out of the tunnels, which is what they did. Once back in the elevator room of the Rijksmuseum, the men sat and had a frank discussion with Henke about what had been happening down there over the past few months. Jones explained that the first survey team which had encountered that specific sewer passageway resigned from their posts after just one night down there. A week later, one of their co-workers who decided to stay on committed suicide after complaining to everyone that he would hear whispers coming from the tunnel while he worked nearby. Not long after that, Jones's previous supervisor had seen someone standing at the mouth of Tunnel 72F and had followed them inside. One of the cleanup crews found him crawling out of the sewer on his hands and knees, crying hysterically like a child.
He had been heavily medicated ever since, but no one knew exactly what he had seen down there. He would not talk of it, but the men who recovered him claimed he was repeating one word over and over fanatically. Nazi.
Oh no, the Nazis.
Is it Nazi mole men?
Oh no, the Nazi moloids.
Is it Nazi mole men instead?
Moloids.
They dig for Hitler.
These guys dig Hitler. Nazi moment of the SS coming soon to a theater near you.
I can see that. Directed by Rob Zombie. I take this next one?
Yeah, take this next one.
Henke was a nervous wreck after his experience and ordered that no one go into Tunnel 72F. He continued to work down in the sewers day after day in the dark, but he was consumed by the notion that he had seen something so frightening that he had forced himself to forget. Over the next few weeks, he lost weight and had trouble sleeping, often waking up.
Don't worry.
Hold on a second. Sorry. Something came up on my computer. Actually, I lost weight. Often waking up and in a disturbed state, drenched in a cold sweat, unable to recall what he had been dreaming about.
The very idea that brave Henke could be reduced to this, that he could be affected so deeply by something he could not even remember in its entirety, preyed on his pride and his sense of self-worth. He first tried to combat this feeling of helplessness by increasing his knowledge of the tunnels. Knowledge, as they say, is power, and Henke felt that if he knew more about the place in the dark, that he would somehow be less afraid of it. He read about the history of the museum, and while he found very little of it helpful, one local legend struck a chord with him.
It was rumored that during the Second World War, a number of Jewish families took refuge in the tunnels below the Rijksmuseum. When two SS officers were tipped off of the whereabouts, they entered the tunnels with some local volunteers, hoping to arrest them down there, and most proudly send them off to a concentration camp. The rumors were that the families ambushed the SS officers and the Nazi sympathizers, killing them and dumping their bodies somewhere in the sewers. This was a story Henke related to me. It was sad to see him so shaken and vulnerable, a strong, powerful individual who had never shown so much as a hint of fear for or of anything to be reduced to a diminished man living on his nerves.
Should I finish this off?
Want me to take the next one, and then you can take the last two?
Sure.
Okay. Unfortunately, the story does not end there. Some men are haunted both by what they had seen and by what they cannot understand. Ego can be a terrible burden on anyone. Once it is fractured or damaged, the lasting effects can be devastating. Henke could not let go of his pride, nor his desire to feel strong again. Whole. He had never been afraid of anything before, and no matter what was in the tunnel, no matter how much I attempted to dissuade him, he was determined to confront it and reclaim his self-worth. The hubris of man!
Fine wine. 3 days later, Henke's body was found at the mouth of Tunnel 72F, stuffed into an old duffel bag. It was a heart attack which had killed him, but whoever broke, twisted, and shoved his body into that morbid sack after he died was never caught. I should mention that the bag was of particular interest to the police, in case it could reveal something about Henke's death. It was traced to Germany, Army issue to the precise, and had been manufactured since 1941.
Oh, shit!
This is a much more serious episode of Fear the Ink.
Fuck.
We're very serious, because we're professional, and this is a really good story.
This is fucking good.
This was like an episode of Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
This is straight up an episode of like Twilight Zone or or Outer Limits.
Yeah. This is giving me that episode of Twilight Zone where it was a former commandant and he's visiting Dachau.
Oh yeah.
But then he sees all the ghosts of the people he persecuted and killed.
Yeah, it reminds me of that episode of the Twilight Zone. Yeah, holy crap. I really like this episode,
Yeah.
guys. This was a really good episode. And what would you rate it?
I give it 10 red cyclones out of 10.
Oh snap. I give it 10 Nazi moloids out of Jewish molemen. But we heartily enjoyed the story, guys. We liked it.
Yeah, this is really good.
This is a really good story. Thank you, Michael Whitehouse. I feel like we've read something of his before.
Have we?
I'll look it up.
Yeah,
We'll look it up. We have a Facebook page.
We do.
Fear the Ink. Just look that up, Fear the Ink Podcast.
Yep.
We are trying to get on iTunes. We do not have a Instagram. We don't have a Twitter. I'm thinking about starting a Twitter.
They are starting a Twitter?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to tweet about. But,
It's kind of mostly, I'm guessing our tweets are probably going to be what we're mostly posting on the Facebook page,
Yeah.
which I recommend. Visit the Facebook page. We're posting images of monsters. I've been writing about monsters
You've been writing about monsters? I'm going to start, I have a batch of, like, short horror movies to show everyone again.
Yeah.
Have you been watching those? There's some good ones on there.
No, not recently.
Yeah, and we're going to check out, we're still going to do that thing where we're going to watch a movie and do a podcast about it afterwards.
Yeah.
But we love you guys. We are getting, I don't know, no viewers, whatever.
But still, we love you.
Still, we just got to keep talking.
If anyone watches us, we love you.
Yes,
no matter
we
what.
love you, and we'll protect you from the ghosts wearing tins.
We'll protect you from the Nazi Moloids.
We'll protect you from Gary Grayson. What was that guy's name?
Yeah, Gary Grayson.
Gary Grayson. But and also, don't keep no peppermint in your pocket, and watch out for the
and change your doors.
Change your doors. That was a good story.
That was a good one too. We highly recommend you read the White Doors,
yes,
or listen to us read White Doors.
Oh yes, please, no, yeah. Plug us. Plug us, Robert.
Please watch our stuff.
What?
we really enjoy it when people watch.
Rob, is this e-begging?
I'm not asking for money.
Oh, you're not
just
asking
saying.
for money. That's
please watch our stuff if you can.
Watch our stuff.
If you can.
If you can, yeah. I mean, we're audio only. So please, hear our stuff. Alright, guys. We'll see you next time. We love you all.
Love you.
Fear the Yank.
See ya.
Bye!